Team on the top left corner, Vanessa,
Yeah.
is about to go live.
Okay, now Kanin.
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Once again, I welcome you to our interview, to our live show every Super Saturday. Now, it's been a while that we haven't gone live really, and we haven't had our panel discussion because we had Ramadan. We celebrated Ramadan, and after that, we had some rest. But now we're back, and we're back full gear. And today we have a very special guest who is super energetic. So she is the right person to bring the energy back here on Nexados. So before we'll start with the interview, I'd like to thank our avid fans and listeners and viewers for staying loyal and really looking forward to what they can learn from Nexados. So this morning, my friends, I'd like to welcome Puja Baku, who is a globally acclaimed tapestry artist from Delhi, India. She creates handcrafted needlepoint tapestries and thread paintings on fabric using threads or wool. Puja is also the founder of Tapestry for Charity, an initiative that uses the proceeds from the sale of her tapestries for the rehabilitation of underprivileged children. Besides being a tapestry artist and running a charity initiative, Puja is an ad professional, a creative writer, a poet, a blogger. Yes, that's true. So we will learn a lot from her this morning. Currently, she is authoring a book that is an anthology of her write-ups, her poems, and her life experiences. So Puja is not just an artist when it comes to paintings and colors and handcrafts, but she is also a person of brilliance because she loves to write and she wants to communicate not only through her works of art, but even through her words. And today we're going to learn from Puja about her tapestry art, her journey as a tapestry artist, the challenges she faced in achieving her goals, her charitable pursuits, her writings and poems, and finally her learnings from her various interests. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, brothers and sisters, wherever you are, please help me welcome Puja Baku. Good morning, Puja.
Good morning. Hello.
How's your Saturday morning so far?
Lovely, lovely. It's a beautiful morning and I'm talking to such a beautiful host. I'm really happy.
I love your energy. And we connected earlier, and I just love the energy that you are exuding, and it revitalizes my morning. Just to have a talk with you. So, Puja, let's start the ball rolling then. How did you decide to take up tapestry as a career?
Okay, so let me tell you from the beginning. Firstly, I'm a small town girl from this place called Sanpur in UP in North India. So Sanpur is famous for its wood inlay work, which is exported across the world. So being from a small town has its advantages because the languid and the laid back kind of a lifestyle. It's a very fertile breeding ground for creativity. So because there's no distraction, no nothing. So what do? You tend to incorporate some hobby or the other. So I was, since childhood, I love to dip my finger into every hobby pie. So whether it was painting or embroidery or, carpet weaving or crochet or knitting. So everything I, love doing. And also I was bitten by the recycling bug very early in life. So I remember making, glass pyramids out of these small glass bottles, or making dolls out of rags, or making paper flowers out of newspapers. So anything and everything, all leftovers were kind of fodder for some creative action or the other. So, I was always very greedy to learn crafts. So, I would see my mom and her friends doing something or the other, and I would keep pestering them to teach me. So I was quite a nuisance for them that way. But I come from a service background, but I was very keen to do my own business and be my own boss right from the beginning. So my first business idea also came from my passion for embroidery and crochet and handicrafts. So I put together a team of some 14, 15 women, and we started to create handcrafted sweaters for children. And I was supplying to some of the leading brands in Delhi, like Childcare and FUs and all. And my own brand was called PJ Crafts, after my name, Puja. So PJ Crafts was a lot of fun. But since it was sweaters, so it was a seasonal business. So I started to look for some additional challenge work-wise. And I'd heard that advertising at that point in time was an upcoming line, which I'd heard that it wasn't just lucrative, it was also creative. So I decided to take the plunge and got into advertising. But for this business, I had to relocate to Chandigarh, which is again in North India. But the market dynamics in Chandigarh were very different from Delhi. So, PJ Crafts became a bit of a challenge to handle because advertising, I didn't know, was very demanding as a profession. So running two businesses and looking after the family and all was getting just a bit too much for me. So PJ Crafts had to be relegated to the status of a hobby, and I got full throttle into advertising. And so then, because I was learning the ropes of the trade, I got into creatives and all, so my creative strengths also became stronger that way. And for the next few years, I was very busy with advertising. But then after 3-4 years of being into advertising, there was a string of personal as well as professional challenges that happened. So firstly, my resignation was forged and I was ousted from my own company. So, that was one. And so I had no money to pay my bills. And since I never kept a saving account, so I was literally penniless. And then there were a number of court cases that happened, and custody battles happened, and professional struggles happened. So all those things in between, I lost my daughter in a freak accident on her first birthday. So these multiple things happened. So literally, my life was in the dumps that time, financially, emotionally, and domestically. But like they say that life is a 10-speed bicycle, and most of us never go beyond the second gear or the third gear. You don't need to go, but unless you're faced with the challenge. So now, because I had multiple challenges, so it was my time to use all my unused gears. So then I, started from the scratch once again. I picked myself, and I started building a new agency, literally brick by brick, and then and that agency became so successful that I never had to look back. So for the next 20 years, it was just work, and more work, nothing else. But in between, I got remarried again. I had my daughter, I had another daughter. So, and finally in 2012, I retired from advertising because, there was this huge bucket list waiting, all those things that we wanted to do apart from work. With 20 years, we just blinked and 20 years went. So we said, this is not happening, there's more to life than just running after money all the time. So we said, okay, so now let's retire. So we fixed an age. Okay, we reached 50 and we'll retire, my husband and I. So we reached 50 years of age and we said, okay, let's retire. So that's what we did. And so then embroidery and charity were both very integral parts of my bucket list. So then I started pursuing them with all passion. But in 2015, I was looking for some funding options for my one of my charitable pursuits. And then I wasn't getting much help. So then it suddenly struck me. My friends used to keep telling me that, you make lovely embroideries and all, why don't you sell them? I never thought of selling them because, I was happy having them all over the house, just displaying them like that. So then it suddenly struck me that what if I go commercial with my hobby, and the money that I get from that, why don't I use that for charity? Because what was happening was that, when I used to go out for charity, I used to miss my embroidery. And when I used to do my embroidery, I used to feel guilty that, I should be out helping people and all. What am I doing sitting in my house with the AC and doing embroidery? So this became this was a eureka moment for me because, this combined my passion for embroidery with my mission for charity. So then in 2015, I started Tapestry for Charity. And so after that, I started, creating tapestries, which I started selling. And now I'm exporting to 5-6 countries. And in India also have a strong presence. So this is how Tapestry for Charity was born. I hope I
Wow.
answered your question, or did I go somewhere else?
Listening to you, I just realized that you're a person who really knows what you want. Even though life throws you lemons, but you know how to turn them into lemonade. So
Yes, I
you're
love
a tough
lemonade.
person, Pooja. Based on what you just said, I like it when you just use this metaphor. Sometimes we're like a bicycle and we don't use
Yeah,
we
correct.
are not to full gear, but when we face challenges, we use the tap of gears in our lives, and I think that made you who you are right now. So, was there a point in your life where doing needlepoint embroidery became your outlet to de-stress?
I guess needlepoint was not only my outlet to de-stress, it was also literally, it is my go-to for, to ideate, to create, and to meditate. So,
Wow.
I experienced my first lockdown in my early 20s. I mean, now lockdown is being experienced everywhere across the world, but I was not even 20 when I was 18 when I got married. And my first marriage was a total disaster. And we were posted in this, a cantonment area in Punjab. It was a very secluded kind of an area. We had a huge house there with no neighborhood, nothing. And there was just one lone library that was adjacent to our house. And my spouse had a traveling job. So he would, he would lock the main door for security reasons and leave on tours for days together. So here I was, barely 18, 19 years of age, all alone in that huge house, no neighborhood. And suddenly, when there was no company, that house would start haunting me. So I used to be very scared and, I was really traumatized that time. So what I used to do was sneak out from the side door of that house and go to that library and sit there for hours and, read books. And that library had very beautiful books on hobbies and, art and craft. So I would devour those books for hours and hours. So in a way, the circumstances were such, that I was able to develop a passion for this out of nothing else, but I had no choice because I was all alone and I had hours to kill. So all that time that I had, I devoted to, creating tapestries and honing my skills as an embroidery artist, which helped me so much later. And also, all that fear and all that trauma that I was going through, I got over it in the sense because I became busy doing something instructive, and it just embellished my vacant hours with the productivity. So because of that, I couldn't even think of. I was not scared anymore, and suddenly because of this whole thing of being able to create something, that high that you get out of that, I became a very positive kind of a person over a period of time. And later on, literally, like you said, that what do I do to de-stress? I don't need to de-stress because I don't even know how to get stressed. Now, literally, I don't know how to get stressed. There's so many times when they say, okay, dar jao, now you have to get your vaccination and, go pandemic, ye ho gaya, wo gaya. I said, okay, cool, it's there, but it doesn't, I don't get stressed out of it. I will get my unused gas out and act on a problem, but I will not get stressed. So it can be very frustrating for people sometimes, but most of the people love me for this.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the optimism from you. Just imagine this passion was born out of boredom. Like
Yes, exactly. Which is what's
it's
happening in the
freedom
pandemic.
out from fear. You realize your freedom to explore, and it started from some sort of fear. And during this pandemic, we know that a lot of people are struggling from mental stress. Now, I believe you have a lot to share because as what you've mentioned, you had your first lockdown when you were in your 20s. So, Pooja, what are the tips that you can give to our viewers who are still facing such emotional and mental stress due to the pandemic? And how can this expression of art serve as a form of healing to them?
See, I think if you talk about healing power, there is nothing that comes close to needlework, especially because it's a very intimate kind of an art form, and it literally speaks to you in this vocabulary of warmth. So because I get very emotional when I talk about tapestry. It's, I'm so passionate about it. I've done it for the last 30 years. So I think there's something very something about this the yarn and the the threads and wool that just draws you into this vortex of comfort, and which is very reassuring somehow. So what happens is, in a painting, when you paints are wet and cold and they are messy, but the yarn is soft, it's dry. And then painting, you have to you get confined to your studio when you make a painting, and you have to stand and do it, and you can't possibly take it around. But a tapestry, you can just carry in your bag and go anywhere, do it at any time. And even 12 o'clock at night, sitting in bed comfortably, you can, create a tapestry. So all those things just make it very endearing for me. And then also creating a tapestry stitch by stitch, and, watching a design evolve from abstraction. So that gives you a different kind of a high, and not just a high, it gives you, it calms you down. It's a meditative kind of a state that you get in. So imagine if I do it for 10 hours a day and I'm in a meditative state. So stress, there's no possibility of getting stressed out. And one thing about the healing properties of needlework is that studies have shown that it holds your stress-causing hormones. Like, it reduces your cortisol, and it also ups your dopamine, your oxytocin, your endorphins, all these happiness hormones. So they get jacked up when you do when you practice this kind of a hobby. So I think it's a great way to heal yourself, especially when you're feeling, the pressures of lockdown and you don't know what to do. So I think everybody should incorporate this hobby.
Yeah. I'm planning to that in my life now. So for those who are starters like me, you don't know how to even start and hold the needle. And so what advice can you give me? Like, I'm a starter, I'm a newbie to this hobby. So where should I start?
Where should you start? Get some, how I started was I sourced painted canvas. I told you my PJ Crafts got relegated to the status of a hobby when I got into advertising. But since I was so passionate about this, this craft, that I started getting these painted canvases from the market. And they used to come with a set of threads and, some kind of a horse or some kind of a, scenery made on it. Nothing very artistic as such, but, since I did not have much time to really get into it, I was doing my business that time. So I started creating tapestries out of those. But very soon I got bored of that, and I said, it wasn't tickling my pituitary gland really. So I said, no, I want something more intricate. And that is the time I thought of creating my own tapestries, because I wasn't getting any good painted canvas in the market. So, but a good starting point would be that probably, you could try sourcing some canvas from the market and doing it. Ultimately, I started creating my own tapestry. That's another story. That's a long one. If you want, I can tell you, but it's up to you.
Well, we can do that offline.
Okay, let me tell you in 2 minutes what happened.
Sure.
So, because I was running PJ Crafts earlier, I used to source my wool from a wool shop in Chandigarh. So that wool shop, that owner, he had a short circuiting in his showroom. And what happened was, the entire wool that he had in the showroom, it got burnt at the edges. So he had these strands of wool lying with him, and he really didn't know what to do with them. So he implored me. He says, "Madam, you keep doing something funny or the other. So why don't you just help me out with these yarns? I don't know what to do and with them." So out of nothing but pure sympathy for the guy, because he was stranded with this yarn. I said, okay, I'll buy that room from you. He said, I have a room full of this, pieces of yarn. So I said, okay, I'll buy that room off you, without even seeing what he had. I just wanted to help out the guy. So I paid him a certain amount. And since I did not have any space in my house to keep that yarn, I said, listen, keep it there only. And I'll put my lock outside your store on that room. So I went to put my lock. And when I opened that door, and I saw that room full of, this colorful yarn and all. And I had another eureka moment. So I said, why don't I? And I told you, I was saturated with those, those dull painted canvases and those horses and all. I didn't want to do those. I wanted to do something more intricate. So when I saw that room full of woolen yarns, I said, why don't I use this yarn and paint my own canvas? And also these canvases that I was getting in the market, they were very small in size, this much and this much. And with my kind of stamina to do embroidery, I could make 5 feet by 6 feet. So what was this doing for me? I would make it in a day. So, so then I thought, okay, then I started making giant canvases, 5 feet by 6 feet, 4 feet by 3 feet, big ones. But I needed some kind of a concept, for my tapestries. So then what happened was we happened to travel to Rajasthan at that time. And I saw all these, these Rajasthani people there with their lush mustaches and their, the chiseled jawlines and all. I said, okay, this is my muse. Now I'm going to paint and embroider these on my tapestries. So because I was from advertising, I knew about these designing software and all. So what I did was I clicked a lot of pictures of these people, and I made digital paintings of those in Photoshop. Then I took out the printout on paper, and then I made a grid on the paper. Okay, so I make a grid on the paper. Once you make a grid on the paper, you can enlarge it to any which size. So then I would take a big piece of fabric and I would make the same grid on that fabric. And then I would roughly draw that image on that and paint it again roughly, just to give me an idea why. Because when you're doing embroidery, it's right here, right next to your eyes. So it's very difficult to get to judge the dimension of the thing that you're doing. So the major part of the improvisation happens as you are creating the tapestry. But some rough idea I would get, and then I would start making it. So it would, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 8 months it would take me to create one tapestry. But it was very, very satisfying. And yeah. So I think anybody who wants to start could probably start with the painted canvas first, and then, come to something like this.
So. Wow. That's a lot to digest, but I really want to try this. I want to try this out. So there's a tapestry behind you, Pooja. I believe it's one of your works. Now, what is the reason behind the global appeal of your work, of your art? And what do you think is the main attraction for those who invest in a Puja Bhakoo tapestry?
Okay. I think what works the most for my tapestries is that they're able to give a contemporary twist to a traditional art. So this Perti needle point that I do, it's an ancient European art which was practiced in the 18th century by the elite. So and now I've kind of given it a twist. So with the modern structures I make. My current themes are very contemporary. I've been doing nudes, and I've been doing, I've worked on the pandemic series also. So I think what people like is that paintings somehow are very common. So one house can have 20 paintings, but you will hardly see one thread art there. And if anybody has a thread art, he'll display it very proudly right in the center of the drawing room or something like that. So I think people get fascinated by the kind of labor that goes into creating something like this. And I think in a world of the 2-minute noodles, when everything is like kind of instant gratification. So when people see something which is intricate and created by with so much passion, so it kind of draws them to it. And also, I think what happens in a painting, if something goes wrong, you can fix that creative anomaly by just with a brush stroke. But in a tapestry, it's very difficult to unpick what you do. So one has to be very careful and to create it. So and once I create a tapestry from the scratch, because there is no graph, there is no stencil that I make it from. I just make it. I go improvising as I make it. So it's impossible to replicate. So this makes it kind of valuable for people, because it's something exclusive which cannot be repeated or replicated by the artist herself. So maybe that also just adds to the aura. I'm imagining myself, but maybe it's not. And another thing is that now the millennials now, they have a global exposure to art because of all these online channels and all. So they want to express their individuality through their art, and so they like concept-based art. They just don't want any, just a swish like that. No, it has to have some story behind it. And so that probably also goes in my advantage, because each series that I make, it has a concept, it has a story behind it. There's a reason why it's done. And so all my lines of tapestries, like, nude aesthetics, mystic strokes, then there is mindscape, there is pandemic, there's aftermath. So all of them have a story and why it was done. So that, I guess, people like.
Wow. I mean, Pooja, I really, yes, it's true. You are very innovative, and I like the way you think, you explore, you're willing to explore. You're such a risk taker, and you're daring. You want to touch things that have not been touched. And I think this is a very good quality that you have, aside from the talent, the sheer talent that you are bestowed with. Now, you just mentioned at the beginning that you've been through a lot of challenges. Your first marriage went on a toss, and then you got married. You lost your income, your job, and then you had to start from the ground up. Now, this is actually, you are an epitome of a successful person. And days, we know that there are countless people have lost their jobs during the pandemic, and many businesses have closed down. All right, but new opportunities have opened as well. Now, in your opinion, what are the top qualities people should possess for them to overcome challenges victoriously? Because earlier, like, we started with that, and then we talk more on the intricacies of having or starting your own tapestry work. But now, as we go back to the big picture, as a person, now, what do you think are the top qualities that we should possess for us to be victorious, no matter what, and we can, tap our the other gears of our lives? You just mentioned this earlier. We want to go full gear.
Okay, so you know what? We know the world is changing, and the world always evolves, and mankind also keeps evolving with time and all. So all those things happen. So even now there are evolutionary changes that are happening. But what is different now is that the technological revolution that has come in the last few decades. So that has been unprecedented, and artificial intelligence has struck us in a big way. So it has made life easy in many ways, but also it has swallowed many jobs. So right now, what we should do probably is, firstly, I think, because AI can perform 99% of the jobs that humans can. So we need that. Of course, there are new jobs being created also now, but now we need to create jobs which humans can do better than artificial intelligence. Because what happens is, there are two kinds of skills. There are hard skills and there are soft skills. So hard skills is, suppose you learn how to drive a taxi, and then Tesla comes along, and they have these self-driving cars. So your job becomes redundant because it's a hard skill. Then what happens is, you're a doctor and you perform surgeries and all. So suddenly AI comes in and it starts performing your surgery. So what do? Because you've specialized in that one thing, and so beyond that, you reach a dead end. And what happened was that earlier, when our forefathers were hunters and gatherers, and every person could do multiple jobs. He would be a cook, he would be a plumber, he would be a chef, he would be a doctor. All those things were being done by one single person. So they were kind of all-rounders. Then we had the era of specialization, where one person would do one thing. A doctor would be a doctor, that's it. A plumber would be a plumber, that's it. So, and it was kind of, one would look down upon a person who was a jack of all trades, master of none. You must have heard that line that people say, master of none. So, this person is all over the place. He does multiple things. So he hasn't specialized in anything. But now we're back to that, because hard skill, now those are hard skills. What the doctor learned or what the plumber learned, those were hard skills. But that doesn't equip you to deal with a situation where your very job becomes redundant. So then what do? Then what comes into play is your soft skill. And the soft skill, the number one soft skill that you require to, especially in this era of changing parameters, constantly changing parameters, is resilience. So resilience is that one thing that will, it's a capacity to bounce back, when you face adversity. So I think resilient people are not only more fulfilled at work, they are also more focused, and they are more decisive. So
Great.
it just helps you have a more optimistic outlook, and maybe it becomes a kind of a buffer against onset of any situation, any trouble that you might face, and it also gives you a strength to fight job insecurity and skill redundancy. So I think, especially now with the pandemic posing so many future challenges for us, unknown future challenges. So if you build your resilience, it just helps you cope up better with that. So that is one. And if I'll just talk a little bit more about resilience, because I'm very passionate about this topic particularly because it's so much the need of the hour. And when I see people, not being able to cope up, it just kinds of, it makes me feel sad. So resilience, I think I would say has four components basically. It has courage. And by courage, I mean the ability to get excited when you face a challenge. Suppose, some unforeseen situation befalls you. Instead of getting scared, you get excited that, okay, now, how can I get out of this? And what more will I learn while I'm getting out of it? So that is one, that's courage. And then connection, it's a connection that you make not only with yourself and what you do, but with the entire planet, your co-planeters, people who are you sharing the planet with. So whether it is, it's not only human beings, it's also the flora, the fauna. You have to take everything and, nature, you have to take everything along with you as you go and make a connect, because we're all a part of this cosmos as a whole, right? And thirdly, I think creativity. So creativity is, you need to develop your talents and you need to create opportunities for yourself. So yeah, so that is very important. And the last thing is bouncing. So bouncing back is your ability to recover and to grow in adversity. So there are people who have, who probably who have lost jobs and they are at a dead end as to what to do. And there are other people who have found some kind of a niche within this challenge and risen from there. So basically, that's what one needs to do to rise when you face being faced by problems. So I think resilience is the watchword and the keyword for the times to come.
Yeah, I can see in you, Pooja. When you speak, you're not speaking straight from your head, but you're speaking straight from your heart. And I strongly believe that these, what you've said right now, are in fact the qualities that you have embedded in your system, in your life, because you're speaking directly from your experience. And before we continue to the next question, I'd like to read a few comments from our viewers this morning. We have one. I'd like to say hello to Fazila Hassan. Absolutely amazing. So resilient through tough times. And I also would like to read the comment from Nazreen Variyawa. She's an author as well. Makes me want to explore a new hobby to feed into my authoring. Such a lovely departure show from the norm. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, and in fact,
Right.
Pooja, when I saw your work of art, it really made me think of exploring this hobby, because I'm kind of, I have the tendency to be too bookish, and I'm on my laptop just on Texas. But when I look at your work and the samples that you've shown to me when we went off camp, I just, it made me feel it triggers something in me. I said, why not? Why should I be afraid of trying to be more creative other than being creative with words? Because potatoes and yarns, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I can start, making my own painting or tapestry, then display it at home. I want to experience the
Yes.
feeling that you shared earlier, the kind of satisfaction, because when I finish a job or a work, I feel satisfied. But this is something I haven't done in my life, really. And whether you believe me or not, till now I can only draw sticks, human sticks, and I cannot even combining colors is a challenge for me. So I think this is something that I really would.
But
I mean,
Janessa,
I would like
this
to
is one of the
explore.
things. Not everybody would get into needlework, but there are so many other things. I'm just saying that why should one quality, why should one thing define you for the rest of your life? You're born only once, right? So, and there is so many inspirations across the world. There's so much to do. So why not that is why I tried to retire, at a good time, so that, I didn't want for whatever little money, balance I'd made to only pay for my bypass surgeries and my, my heart attacks. I wanted to have time, because beyond a period of time, what you have to ask yourself this question: what is more valuable? Is the time more valuable, or is the money more valuable? Because beyond a point, the number of zeros in your bank account will not make a difference, but those years that you squander away in chasing that money, those years are not going to come back. So
Yeah, but
isn't it?
you mentioned that you have around 500. You have created around 500 tapestries.
Easily.
Right? And then just even so, it really made me think when you shared that story behind off cam, that you have created almost 500 tapestries and you just stuck them at home, and now you have decided to sell them and the proceeds will be for your charity. I realized, oh my, what have I done over these years? I mean, if I start doing now, 20 years from now, I may have.
It's never too late to start. And my initial work was very, very sad. So out of 500, the good ones must be what, 200? The initial ones when I was trying, that was pretty sad. But unless you pass that stage, you don't reach the next level.
Yeah, and you're very inspiring, Puja. I mean, really, I'd like to do this. And by the way, I'd like to read another comment from Sir Kurana. She said, love her designs already, but now her mind is inspired too. Indeed,
Awesome.
you speak with so much passion, and I can feel that. And then we have Rosemary Gerald. Thank you for tuning in with us this morning. So okay, let's continue. You mentioned earlier that you have created a special line of tapestries on the pandemic. So please tell us about these series and the thought behind them.
Okay.
So,
yeah, my favorite topic. Okay, so first I'll just tell you about my tapestries and how the themes have evolved over the last 3 decades. I'm not that old, but when I talk about decades and all that. Anyway, so I told you I started doing those portraits for Rajasthani men. So for a good 20-25 years, I was doing that initially, and because I was working, so my focus was, not on expanding my scope of hobby, but to keep myself busy creatively while I was into advertising. And advertising was an extremely demanding profession. So I was creating, portraits one after the other without thinking of really branching out into something else. But what happened was that I told you once I thought of combining my passion for embroidery with my mission for charity. Then I had to think of a faster turnover, because my tapestries were taking so much time to create. And as long as it was for my personal hobby, time was not a problem. I could spend any amount of time on creating one. But when I had to make money for my charity purposes, then I needed a quicker turnover. So I had to redefine my, my way of doing art and come up with concepts which would be relevant, which would appeal to me also. And while I was doing these Rajasthani portraits, they were embellished with a lot of tactile elements. You've seen the Rajasthanis, like the one in the background here, these colorful turbans and, the mustaches. And so there were a lot of tactile elements in those embroideries, colorful scarves and all. And from that, because I was done doing that for 20 years, I did a 180. Then I started doing nudes. So from doing people who were covered from head to toe with so many things, I went on to nudes. And people were, they were aghast initially, okay, what's happened to her? But, the thing about nudes is that, firstly, there is the moment you see this embroidery at the back, you can make out from the turban that this is a Rajasthani guy. So, his ethnicity gets defined. The era gets defined, these kind of things. But in a nude is ageless, it's timeless, it's you cannot put it into any slot, because there is no ethnicity. Now, if there are no clothes to define, which part of the world it's from. So that was my logic. And my husband's looking at me that, she makes such nice covered people, and what's happened to her? I have to tell you what my little granddaughter tells me. She says, Daddy, Mama, she says, aren't you done making people with butts showing all the time? So anyway, so I started doing these nude aesthetics. I'm still doing because it's a line that has endless scope. You know, every time I sit down to make it, I can come up with something new or the other. So then I did other series. There were, you know, Mystic Strokes. When I was really done with the consumerism all around me, you know, there was just too much of everything. So I made very simple lines. Those were called Mystic Strokes. Let me show you one sample of nude aesthetics, which I'm talking about.
Sure, sure. I would love to see it.
So now you see, can you see this?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So after what you see at the back, then I came down to this. This was really a 180. Okay. So, okay, coming to my creations for the pandemic. So initially what happened was, you know, in the pandemic, firstly, when it just happened, I came out with a series called Mindscape. So Mindscape is basically, you know, because the pandemic called upon the human mind to rethink and recalibrate and to, you know, kind of reimagine things, to rewire. So this Mindscape is basically, it celebrates the human mind's ability to make fresh neural connections. So that is the concept behind it. And let me show you one of those tapestries so that you'll get the idea, because it's a mind working in that. So you'll see how it is.
Wow.
So if you see, you know, it's a mind making fresh neural connections. So that is the idea behind this.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
So,
very good.
yeah. So this was when the pandemic started in March last year. Firstly, it was calling upon the human spirit to, you know, create and think fresh. And then when the pandemic continued, there was a need for people to be more magnanimous towards people, you know, those who were suffering. Everybody has felt the brunt of the pandemic to some extent or the other. But there are people who felt more of it, you know, who did not have the kind of cushioning that probably we do, you know, the emotional cushioning or the financial cushioning and all. So, so for those kind of people, you know, this pandemic series calls on people to be more magnanimous and to be more, you know, humane towards them. So there are a few lines that I've written also on this pandemic. But let me first show you what I made, one of the pieces.
Sure.
So this.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. I hope I'm holding it right.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. So, normally what I do is, you know, when I create a tapestry, I write a small poem on it, which is a kind of a concept note also, you know, which shows my feelings when I was creating that tapestry. So for this pandemic, I've written these few lines. I'll just read them out to you.
Sure.
It says, across a changed world, blinks a disoriented heart. Fragile dreams lie scattered 6 feet apart. A small act of kindness can bring them from the brink, because compassion has far more healing power than you think.
Wow.
Let's overwhelm the world with little bits of caring, because no one ever became poor by giving or sharing. So these were the lines I wrote for pandemic. And finally, what I did was, you know, especially during the second lockdown, when things have, you know, actually hit, and nobody was expecting the pandemic to carry on for this long. And but now, since it has happened, you know, there's an aftermath that's happened because of the pandemic. And there, you know, my series urges people to basically come out of this and basically learn to lose. It's like that, you know, because losing seems to have become a part of life in the last 1 year. So maybe if you learn to lose a little bit each day, then when you lose something big, doesn't seem such a big disaster. So let me just show you the aftermath. First, I'll show you my tapestry. Oh. So this is an aftermath. Okay. Wow. And then I'll just read out a few lines of it. Okay, so it says, Lose something each day. Accept the fluster of the lost door keys. Endure the regret of a badly spent hour. Then train to lose farther, train to lose faster. So when whimsical winds tug at your bearings, or temperamental times lose their sanity, the aftermath will be but a routine disaster. Look in the eye, the slave of fate, and tell it, you alone are your destiny's master. Tough times may last perhaps a bit longer, but cleansed of excesses, we'll come out stronger. Explore a new horizon, tread a new path. Let your resilience heal ravages of the aftermath. So this is on.
You know what, Lisa, after having seen your tapestry and listening to your poem, I have my eureka moments because lately I try to hold on to something.
Uh-huh.
It's very personal for me. I know that this is live and people are viewing us and people could view this again and again. But listening to you right now, I felt there's something in me that you really touched because I tend to hold on to this. I don't want to let it go. But hearing your words, it's okay to lose a little bit, one step at a time. So when it's gone, your heart is ready. And I've been trying to convince myself that it's okay to lose this a bit. But you just put them in you just put my feelings in a better way. You phrase it in a better way. So yeah, you know what? I feel like I just want to sit right now and meditate and just introspect myself. I have my eureka moment. Yeah, I'm really taking your words very personally. It's not just an interview for me, but I'm really learning from you, which leads me to the next question. I could see you have a fighting spirit, Puja. I mean, it's my compliment, listening to you with all the fire and the passion, and I believe you're very resilient. What was the deepest valley you had been through in life, and how did you deal with it? I believe a lot of our viewers right now, probably live or not live, are facing, their deepest valleys. But in your case, what was it, and how did you overcome? And when you bounced back, you became stronger.
See, I think my life and my career have seen three very distinct phases or innings. And the first innings was the most challenging, and so there was also a lot of learning because there were more challenges to deal with, and which prepared me better for my second and my third innings. But I would say the one thing that really worked for me, no, not one, actually, there are three things that have worked for me in my life and my career and everything. And the first is positivity. And the second is positivity. And the third is again positivity. So, okay, that was a little dramatic. But so what I'm trying to say is that, for me especially, I told you my circumstances were such that I had to become positive if I had to survive the initial challenges in my life. But, with once my attitude changed for the better, every challenge that I faced, somehow there was, I would come out better than before. So there was actually a stage when, I would face a challenge and I would say, okay, bring it on. That means something better is coming, that is why this challenge has happened. So right from the beginning, when my resignation was forged and I was unceremoniously ousted from my own company. So I was literally on the streets. I didn't have money to pay my rent. I didn't have a house. I mean, I was homeless. I was penniless. And after that, when I started my business again, it became 100 times better than my first business. So had I not been ousted of my first business, I would not have started the second one, right? So because of the challenge that happened because of the first business, I was able to take it to another level. Then I got my son's custody from the Supreme Court that time, and before these problems happened, my son was studying in an average school, whatever education I could afford for him, I was giving him that. But I got his custody from the Supreme Court. And then when my second business started doing pretty well, I could send him to the top schools and the best colleges of the country, so it was good for him. And to the extent that even my daughter, who I lost on her first birthday, you know, I mean, there couldn't have been a bigger tragedy than that. And I'd had her at a time when I was deep into work, and you know, there were multiple challenges happening and all. And yet that daughter also came back to me in my second marriage. So, and you know, and she came at a time when I could give her more time. I could, you know, take care of her, enjoy her better. So in a way, every time life's thrown me a spanner, something good has come out of it. So now, and even when, I mean, a very casual thing that, you know, we take a place on rent, and I would love it very much that, okay, I'm not leaving this house. And then my husband would say, okay, sorry, the lease has expired. We have to shift houses. I would feel very bad. And next time I would get a better house than that. So then I said, okay, why was I cribbing about the first one? I got a better one. Similarly, when we were in Chandigarh and we had to come to Delhi. So Delhi is known for, you know, very pigeonhole kind of houses and things. So my husband told me, he says, listen, if you're going to Delhi, be prepared. Don't think that you'll get spacious houses like we have in Chandigarh, but whatever happens, just make do with it. I said, okay, you know, I said, okay, Pooja, this time you're not getting anything better than this. But I don't know, just one thing after the other happened, and I landed up in a place which I just so love. so what I'm trying to say is that if you think positive, you know, I never get dissuaded by a challenge, because something better will happen. If it not happen, I will make it happen. So that is it.
That's something I need to have. I need to, you know, have that mindset.
You know, there's a word. There's a word.
Always come to me. So,
I want to tell you, there's a word called Panglossian. A Panglossian is a person who's excessively optimistic. So I think it may not be a very good thing. You know, it can be frustrating for my family, poor guys, because they refuse to. I mean, I refuse to be worried about anything, and they say, "Tumko farak hi nahi pad raha hai," you know. Yeah, but it's just that optimism is to a level which probably it's
that's
good for me. I don't know about others.
Because you are brushing it on us. I mean, I really love your high level of optimism. Yeah, I'm just about to read a comment from Sir Kurana. She said, it can feel better to lose or to let go, something to ponder on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's really, that was really very, very powerful, Puja, because we tend to, sorry, I'm trying to backtrack a little bit, because we tend to, when we hold a good fighter on something, when we lose it, it's going to be very painful. Yes. So yeah, and you remind me of someone, I really forgot his name, but one of the secrets that he has in life, I forgot, but he has learned in life is not to get too attached with anything.
Absolutely.
I forgot, he's very famous, and be it job, be it, you know, be it in a relationship, don't get too attached with something.
Yeah.
So when you go, you know, it's not so, and when they leave you, it's not very painful. And you know that there will always be something that will come. Something bad.
Yes.
Yes, that's powerful. I love that. And you know, Pooja, you're one thing I really admire in you personally is the fact that you can verbalize your thoughts and feelings, because
I think advertising helps with that.
Because there's a lot of artists who are very good with colors and, you know, art, but they tend to be very introvert and silent. They're the silent type, so they express their thoughts and feelings through their work. But with you have your work, and you even create a story out of what you've created. So thank God for your life. You know, you're so blessed with this, and may your life be a blessing. I believe that you have that in your DNA. God has blessed you with a big heart for charity. So your talent is not only for yourself. Probably in the past, for you, it was just mere passion. It was sheer passion. But now your passion is turned into a profit, not even for yourself, but for others to benefit. And this is something very, you know, extraordinary. And I really admire you, Pooja, really from my heart, for being so generous and being such a giver to many. So I'd like to proceed to the next question. I think you've already answered my next question, but let me proceed to the other one. What is the driving force behind your philanthropic work or charity?
Okay, you know, firstly, when I lost my daughter at a very, you know, on the first birthday, there was some part of me that time decided gave me an extra soft corner for children and to do something for children. That was just there in my mind, because that guilt that I had, because I held myself responsible somewhere for, losing her. And then what happened was, I think about 10, 15 years back, one of my domestic helps, he had a daughter who suffered from cancer. So I asked him to bring her over from the village, and we tried. I put my heart and soul into trying to get her treatment done and everything, but we lost her. So from that time, it was really encrypted in my mind that I have to do something for children, and especially underprivileged children, and for the education and for the rehabilitation. So this was it came to me at that time, and so I was always doing some kind of charity or the other while I was working. But once I retired, it was because charity was a very, very important part of my bucket list. And once I decided to use my own passion for embroidery for this purpose, so that's how it just took off. And so initially I used to work with a number of charities like the Earth Foundation, Learning Ladder, Connecting Suicide Helpline, Akshar Gyan. So all these charities I was a part of. And then now, since I've started Tapestry for Charity, I normally engage with one or the other, and that is how I share funds. Plus, apart from sponsoring the education of children. And also, I think 2 years back, I read a book called Being Reshma. So this is about acid scar survivor. Acid scar cases are rampant in a place like India. So there are a lot of these girls who have been, their faces have been distorted for no fault of theirs. Someone just comes and throws acid on your face, and that is the end of your life, literally. So Reshma's story was very inspiring because she, from being an acid attack survivor, she went on to walk the global ramps as a model, as a fashion model. So moved by that story, I wrote a poem on Reshma, #victim to #warrior, and I published it on social media, and took up the cause at various places, wherever platforms where I could. And also then I saw that instead of giving ad hoc help to acid scar survivors through Tapestry for Charity, why don't I make them a part of my initiative? So because these women, more than charity, they need a source of income, and some kind of they need a job security, and maybe I should try to generate employment opportunities for them. So that is when I thought of creating a line which I curate and they create, and then we kind of hold an exhibition, and I share the proceeds with them. And this was just about to be done when this pandemic thing happened. And now, because of social distancing and all that, it's a little difficult to get people together and do it. So I'm just waiting for all this to settle down so that I can start. Because there's a lot of ad hoc, is not ad hoc actually, but more there's a lot of ad-libbing that's required in creating a tapestry. So you have to think on the spot and do it and improvise and all. So that is a bit of a challenge that, if I have to make others do it, what part do I make them do and how do I do it? But, it's a kind of a modality that I will work out eventually. So just waiting for things to settle down before I start this initiative.
Wow. I love the fire in you. You just keep on moving forward. And, that's really very inspiring. I mean, for us who are younger in years, and you're one of those people whom we can look up to and challenge ourselves. Hey, you are.
Ask my husband; he'll tell you how much.
Right? If you can,
he said only I know.
At your age, then why not we? This is a challenge for me as well. Why can't I? You can do it. So thanks, Pooja, for sharing your story and your experience. I'd like to read one question from one of our. What do you suggest to our audience to practice resiliency to become better versions of themselves?
Okay. So first thing I would say, obviously, is positivity, because they say we don't actually live in houses or bungalows or flats. We live in our minds, right? So the mind is a place that you need to keep clean and positive. Everything emanates from there, basically. So thinking positive is very important. And then, building your resilience, learning soft skills, learning to be more adaptable, and, so that you become strong from within. That is very important. And very important thing is to avoid cynicism. Cynicism is such a poison. It is uncreative. It's unconstructive. It's spiritually corrosive. So cynicism should be avoided at all costs. And this attitude that why did it happen to me, and that kind of a thing, that should not be there. And very, very important is to upgrade and upskill at all times. And everybody in this world has 24 hours a day. Now, what you do with those 24 hours will make you the person that you are. You can either squander that time away in, I'm not saying don't get into entertainment, but why not go for infotainment? So whereas, instead of sitting with a box of popcorns and watch something on Netflix, I mean, for me, that's blasphemy. I'm sure many people do it and enjoy it. Very good for them. But I would, something which gives you more information, which enhances your knowledge, that could probably work for you, build your resilience. And there is my very firm belief that self-improvement is one investment that will never, it's totally immune to market fluctuations. Because normally you talk about investments going down, going bad and all, but if you invest your time in improving yourself, it can never go bad. And no matter what, whether the economy is in the red, blue, purple, whatever, but it'll pay you dividends at all times. And especially now during the pandemic, when, outer distractions are not there, when you are already holed up. I don't want to use the word hold up, because why should you be holed up in your own house? And your house is made of love. Your loved ones are there, you are there. So that is the best place to be in. So if you are there and you have time, which you never had. Remember all those times when we used to crib, there's no time and everybody's running faster and faster on this economic treadmill. So now finally, when we have time to breathe, to, meditate, to exercise, to be with our loved ones, let's make the most of it. And, there are so many things you can do. Maybe, okay, I do embroidery, but there are so many, read books, read more books. If nothing else, improve your communication style, learn a new language. There are just so many things you can do. Maybe start playing the guitar, learn how to sing, do karaoke. There are 200 things. It's, there is so much to do that you literally get up in the morning. Okay, now today, what am I going to learn today? What am I going to do today? It's just so exciting. Wow. So it pinches on my sleep sometimes, but that's a small price to pay.
But you know what? While listening to you, you actually answered my next question, and I don't know if it makes sense if I read
it. What was your next question?
You just answered part of it.
Okay, let's hear it. If there's anything else, I'll put in.
What practical tips can you give to stay happy, healthy, and opportunity ready, despite the mobility restrictions most of us, if not all, are facing nowadays?
Yeah, I think, since I've spoken about some tips and all, what I can also tell you is that positivity now, it's literally become the new currency for all emotional exchanges. Be positive, think positive, dream positive. That positive is the keyword. If nobody wants to be corona positive, but otherwise be positive is the thing to be, right? But so it's great to be positive and all, but being positive is one side of the emotional coin. So the emotional coin has another side, which is negative thoughts. And you can't wish away negative thoughts from your system. And neither should you feel guilty about, getting negative thoughts, because they are, a complete person is, like I told you, if it's an emotional coin, the one side is positivity, the other side is negativity. But I think we treat the word negativity in a very negative manner, but negativity is not that negative, because negativity can give you a positive results at times. So for example, sometimes they serve a positive purpose because they add more density to your personality. They make more depth, add more depth, more layers to your personality. And so what happens when you get really mad? You try to do something to come out of that situation. So, and that outcome is always positive. So out of a negative situation, you get a positive result. Then what happens is, suppose you lose a job. Then what happens? You suddenly, you start working on your skills, you upgrade your skills, you augment your CV, So again, it's a negative feeling, but it came out with a positive result. Then your loved one falls ill. Suppose somebody has COVID or something. Suddenly what happens is you get into firefighting mode and you try to come out of that situation. So that again, your coping mechanism becomes better. So that way, many of the negative thoughts that you have, they end up into something positive. And also, I think what we should do is, if we look at the brighter side of life, and if we build on our sang-froid, and then it's actually possible to turn your home into anything that you want. Suppose, and firstly, cribbing about being locked, locked in your house. That's not done. What about people who are outside, who are in hospitals and all? They will do anything to come back home, but they can't because, they're suffering from corona. And then to say that, we are missing restaurants. You don't need to go to a restaurant. You can make your home into a restaurant, cook new dishes, and you don't have to burn money for that. Make something small and give yourself a challenge. Okay, today in 200 rupees, I'll cook a meal, and cook it. And it's just exciting for the whole family. Why do you wait to go to nightclubs and to discos? Have a party at home, pick up the karaoke, sing, dance with the family. So everything that you think of doing outside the house is what you can actually do sitting right here in your comfort zone, and in your it's your legit pajama zone. You can wear your pajamas and have those parties and, have a great time. And also this pandemic has happened at a time when, technologically things have advanced so much that you and I mean, you are in one part of the world, I'm in the other part, and here we are communicating, isn't that a blessing? So let's count our blessings. Even if I'm going from one area to the other, I'm sorry, but I when I take off, I just take off.
It's like, no, I feel like I cannot see any problem anymore. There's
You
a
said,
saying
where did we
goes,
get such a talkative guest?
it's fine. There's a saying that goes, an optimistic mind sees, she sees, or he sees an opportunity in every challenge. But the pessimistic mind sees a challenge or problem in every opportunity. So
yeah, that reminds me of an example. So a pessimistic, sure. So there are two brothers. There's an optimist and a pessimist, and there's a room full of horse dung. Okay, so this pessimist goes there and he says, there's dung here and it's so bad and all. And when the optimist comes to the same room, he says, oh wow, if there's dung here, that means there must be a pony around. So he's excited about that also. So it's just your attitude.
You are a poet and you are very positive. Do you have any poems on positivity that you would like to share with us?
Yeah. In fact, I've written 2-3 poems on positivity. I'll read out the one I wrote lately during the second lockdown.
Would love to hear that.
Okay. One second. Last year, a virus reintroduced me to my family, expanding it to include the whole world, stringing us together with similar concerns, connecting us with a common password. It taught me the laws of ephemeral existence by leaving vertical graphs slanted. It taught me in living a life so enchanted, never to take my blessings for granted. I unlearned pride. I unlearned consumerism. I learned the simplistic joys of minimalism. Observing life from an empathy prism, I was home tutored in humanism. Catastrophes will come and catastrophes will go, but the human spirit will thrive and endure. With our DNAs fortified by the power to reason and think, we are far less fragile than we sometimes mistakenly think. The battle seems long and difficulties long drawn, but even the longest, blackest nights unfold into a new dawn. When problems overwhelm or life seems glum, Refer to your own record of trials overcome. Instances of your rising from the ashes are ample. Take courage from your own example. Meanwhile, let's say a quiet prayer for the loved ones who are no longer there, departed untimely for the cosmic abode, leaving Mother Earth in healing mode. Let's be positive, hopeful too. The sun will very soon shine anew. Remember, you do not need happy long-term goals, but long-term goals need a happy you.
Wow.
And one more. Pain is a university. We'll graduate wiser from the class. Till then, let's be each other's strength. And remember, this too shall pass. That's it.
Very nice, Puja. Can I request you to post it on Exodus group so we can read it again, or probably, you know,
Okay.
because this
I'll make a video. I'll make a video.
Sure. And you know, I also write poems myself.
You
And
do?
you know, when
Wow.
yes, I do write. And
Awesome.
I understand the feeling, you know, when you write poems, you have to write with emotions, then the words will just come out spontaneously and instantaneously. And when I write poems, I don't write it with my head, I write it with my heart. So, and I like to feel, I want to know, and I want to feel the feelings behind those words. So if you can even post a video on it on Exodus, then that would be awesome.
Sure, I will. In fact, if you give me that kind of space, I have 3-4 poems on positivity, which I'll give you, and you can post them as and when you want.
Sure, that would be great. And you know, thank you. You know, time flies. I didn't expect we you know, we've been speaking on camera for more than an hour. It seems like just
Seriously? OMG.
Exactly. And I'm learning a lot from you, Puja, and more than, you know, the story behind what you're telling me. It's basically you. I mean, I believe that our circumstance or whatever we have achieved in life is just the product of our minds. And I really have to take charge and take care of my own mindset. That's very, very powerful. And I love the positive energy. You have a lot to share and you have a lot to give. I could feel that, in fact, 1 hour is not enough. I feel like you deserve a second session.
Sorry for yapping so much.
No, don't be sorry. In fact, I thank you for sharing and for speaking your heart out. I believe the viewers can feel that. They can feel your energy, your fire, and there's so much learning behind your story. So, Puja, thank you so much for, you know, giving 1 hour of your Saturday with us.
It's a total investment as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's such an honor to have you and to interview you on our platform. And do you have any last words, Puja, to our viewers before we end this morning's interview?
I think I would just want everybody to, you know, gain positivity and spread it around as much as possible and as far as possible. Because you know, they say for every 1 minute of sadness, you lose 60 seconds of happiness, and that is too big a price to pay. So nobody should be sad even for a minute, right?
That's wonderful. So thank you once again, and
okay.
To our viewers, if you have any questions to Puja, just feel free to drop your questions, your comments below. And for Puja, you can drop your website, your link, or anywhere the audience, the viewers could, you know, reach out to you. So just feel free, and we would love to have you again on board Exodus, Puja. And to our viewers, thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in till the end. And God bless us all. Happy Super Saturday. See you next Saturday, friends. Bye.